Well, thank you all very much indeed for coming, and what a great pleasure to be here. As you all know, elephants are an enormously intelligent and immensely social creature, and they have this complex emotion that you really feel when you're alongside them, and you get a real sense of the shared intelligence we have and this parallel intelligence, this parallel being, and that's what creates this visceral connection between people and elephants. Unfortunately, elephants are in peril, and they face an uncertain future because of our species. And that uncertain future is a result of habitat loss and of the rapacious ivory trade. As you all know, if we can pull together, if we can act now, we do have a hope of stopping this species from disappearing from the wild.
The illegal ivory trade, as you all know, is run by very sophisticated criminal syndicates that have a global reach. And I think in our fight against them, the one thing that we've learned at Save the Elephants is it's not something that we can do alone. It absolutely needs everybody to do this together. We have to link arms, build a coalition of like-minded NGOs, of government authorities, and of people like all of you to help fight this menace. Beyond the ivory trade, we have the issue of what happens when elephants start to compete with people for space. And that's the other big part that we work with. But we believe very strongly that by joining hands together and by all starting to take these steps that favor the environment, we really do become a very powerful force for change. And so I hope that what we can tell you a little bit today about what we're trying to do, but also to look at also how you can all get involved in this. We are all part of the elephant family, and the elephants symbolize the much bigger fight that we have for our environment as a whole.
So what we're going to do a little double act today and try and tell you a little story of Samburu in northern Kenya, where we live, give you a peek into the insights that we're gaining at Save the Elephants into elephant behavior as individuals and as a species, the challenges that they face, and what we can all do to help them. But I think if we're going to start at the beginning, we have to start with Saba, because Saba was there right at the start. So here we go.
It all began about 50 years ago when my father came out as a young PhD student to study elephants in Tanzania. The first thing that he had to do, obviously, was learn how to distinguish one elephant from another, which he did by looking at the outlines of their ears and the shapes of their tusks, and very quickly learned that every elephant has its own unique face, just like a human fingerprint. And once he'd learned who was who, he began to piece together their relationships with each other and started getting very curious about where they went when they disappeared out of sight, up into the forests on the slopes of the Ngorongoro crater. And so he began putting radio collars on them, on the more interesting individuals, and doing this rudimentary radio tracking, the old-fashioned style. The problem was that there was an endemic culture of hunting, and elephants really didn't like people very much. And, you know, sometimes they weren't quite aware that this scientist was actually trying to do things that were to their advantage. And so there's nothing that makes an elephant angrier than feeling that its family is under attack. And this was an occasional misconception that happened when a collaring operation went a little wrong.
Lacking a dart to deliver the vital antidote, there was only one thing to do: to try to inject it by hand. When that failed, to get in close with the Land Rover was the only hope. The needle went home, and so did Sarah's crossed tusks. Having, as she thought, killed her enemy, she backed off to tend the bull who was partly coming round.
Well, that was really how the role of the matriarch was very firmly driven home. Sorry, I had to say that. Up until then, people really thought that elephants were rather like cattle. You had a group of females that, of course, had a great big bull who presided over them. But actually, it was entirely the opposite. And considering what we know now about elephants, that was my father's key discovery. Bulls get kicked out at puberty when they start to become a bit of a nuisance. And elephant families are actually made up of related females with their offspring, led by the oldest and wisest female, who is the matriarch, on whom the whole family depends. And this fantastic, iconic matriarch here was called Boadicea, named after that great Saxon queen who burnt London to the ground fighting against the Romans. She specialized in terrifying threat charges that chilled your blood, but they were normally bluff. And I know my husband thinks that I had a few rather too strong female role models in my early life. Well, we'll fast forward now to our work up in Samburu, which we began in 1997. After I left university, I was able to join my father and help him set up his original research center, where we really built on the work that he'd done in Manyara, but with a completely new population. This extraordinary group of northern elephants, about 1,000 strong, that move through Samburu and Buffalo Springs National Reserves and use it as part of their range. And this chap here is called David Dabalan. I'm sure some of you have met him here before at previous expos. David is from the Samburu tribe. He is an expert on all things elephant. He's been working with us for 15 years, running the long-term monitoring. He knows all of these 1,000 elephants individually on site, and he has the unusual ability of being able to be up in an aeroplane at 500 feet, flying at a speed of 80 knots, and looking out the window and saying, that's Cleopatra, that's so-and-so, that's so-and-so, identifying them like that. He is a bit of an encyclopedia about elephant gossip, which does result in some startling conversations around the dinner table. Like, oh, I saw Hillary Clinton today. Okay, yeah, and she was being mated by Rommel.
So, the work that Save the Elephants is doing up in Samburu, the building on Ian's early work, is really to try and delve into the minds of these animals, seeing how they relate, how they communicate, what drives their movements. And we're trying to look into how elephants are making decisions. And we know that they're driven by the basics that all of us are driven by, like sustenance and safety, sex even, and society. And if we can understand those reasons why elephants are making the decisions they make, we can then see the world from their perspective. And if we can see the world from their perspective, we've then got a better chance of understanding their needs and meeting their needs for the future. We're very lucky in Samburu because the elephants there are already pretty tame and trusting, and they've only become more so over time. And they do us the great honor of ignoring us. If you drive into a group of elephants and turn off the engine, they'll come up right up close, and that gives you a pretty unique view, an up-close view of elephant society. Sometimes it can get a little too up close. And this is Anwar. And Anwar's got a thing about cars. Something about...
Sorry.
Don't you love that, the way Alfred says sorry there? You know, it's very rude to move the car like that, but Anwar's car hugging can get quite expensive, and we've lost a couple of windscreens, not from aggression, but he's just got a tusk sitting by the window and someone else comes up and pokes him in the bum and he goes, whoa! And there's your windscreen gone.
But really, it's these sort of getting to know these elephants as individuals that has opened up their world in an extraordinary way. And we've watched their lives unfold for the last 20 years and been privy to some of their most private moments, like when they give birth. This is a very rare thing to see. It normally takes place at night under the cover of darkness, but this particular baby was born in the middle of the day, right in front of one of our team. And of course, when elephants give birth, it's a moment of incredible emotion, just like it is for us humans. The first view that this little baby will have of the world is as his family comes rushing round, and he'll look out through this forest of trunks and legs as they form a formidable defensive circle around him. But you know, elephants are very slow breeders. It makes them very vulnerable to heavy predation like poaching. And for a little bull like this to become a significant male, he has to get to the age of 30 before he can learn to breed, before he can breed, in a world that is changing so fast. Already, human population pressure and climate change are desertifying the landscape around him. And there's massive infrastructure projects that are coming into this area now that's cutting up the elephant's former range. And most ominously, since 2008, we've seen this terrible resurgence in illegal ivory trade. The demand for ivory exploded in 2008 in China, thanks to an economic boom, but also a misguided decision by CITES, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, to allow an experimental sale of stockpiled ivory, which basically opened the floodgates of trade. And the price of ivory just began to skyrocket. And as it did, the killing of elephants intensified. What does that mean in numbers? Well, Tanzania has lost 60% of its elephants over a 4-year period. Mozambique is about the same in a similar time frame. In the Congo Basin, that huge heart of Africa, and in the Democratic Republic of Congo in particular, there's been a terrible loss of elephants. In the DRC, it's estimated that there are no more than 5,000 to 10,000 elephants, forest elephants, that are left. And these are the key seed dispersers of the forest. So now what's happening as the forest begins to empty is the actual structure is beginning to change. What these numbers, of course, don't tell you is the individual suffering of each elephant. This male is called Koitalel. He was killed in 2014. We heard the gunshots at dusk. It always happens when there's a full moon, because that's when people can see. A team of rangers rushed out to try and lay an ambush because he ran away from the scene of the crime. But he probably ended up too close to the ranger headquarters, and as a result, they never came to get the ivory. Well, mortally wounded, Koitalel ran for his life, and in a last desperate attempt to remain standing, he tried to throw himself up into that spindly tree and hook his tusk over a branch. But as the life force ebbed from his body, he slumped to the ground, and he stripped all the bark off that tree. And he broke his leg. We've been really hard hit in Samburu by poaching. Cora, you do it now. I'm getting too
Moving
much
swiftly on. It's a very grim situation that we're facing, but it's not all bad. And in northern Kenya, at least, we have a solution that works. And that's not a solution that Save the Elephants has delivered on its own. It's only been possible through collaboration. And we've linked arms with all of our partner organizations that work in the north some that work nationally, and with the government wildlife agency, the Kenya Wildlife Service. And together, we have deployed bands of community rangers through the communally held land across the north, creating a low-tech community solution and increased awareness. Meanwhile, we've delivered a high-tech solution through the tracking that has come on leaps and bounds since Iain first pioneered it back in the 60s, and now is a very high-tech way of guiding effective and efficient ranger patrolling with few resources, but you can get the rangers where the elephants are easily. All the way through to legal reform. And we've had a new Wildlife Act in Kenya, and we've been busy training magistrates and prosecutors and so on to get this, to get these laws properly implemented. And it's been transformative, and you can see it in the data. And we'll spare you much detail about the graph, but one of the key metrics we can use in the north is, or across Africa, is this proportion of illegally killed elephants. And what you've got here is a threshold of sustainability below which populations can grow. And between 2002, when the program started, up to 2008, you see it's fairly stable. 2009 was a blip where after the one-off sale to Ivory in Japan in 2008, we actually started seeing many more elephants being poached. The proportion went down because there was a drought that year that masked this level of illegal killing. In 2010, 11, 12, we started getting crisis levels. 73% pike is a crisis level. That's when the interventions that were taking place in Kenya started to bite. And since then, we've seen that curve come right down. 2014, we had more babies born than died. 2015, increased improvement. 2016 so far, and we're still looking good. So there are bright spots. Sadly, it's not everywhere. And Garamba National Park in northern DRC, where the Samburu was recounting some of the awful figures, the human cost of this ongoing crisis is also being felt. And in Garamba, currently they're losing rangers at the same rate that soldiers were lost on the Western Front in World War I. That's how serious the situation is. So Save the Elephants, we wanted to find a way that we could scale up what we were doing. And that's where we deepened our already deep relationship with the Wildlife Conservation Network and came up with a vehicle called the Elephant Crisis Fund. And what we wanted to do was leverage our experience and get WCN's experience at creating collaborations and use their model of and their whole ethos that 100% of every dollar donated reaches the ground. And we've used that to build a collaboration of organizations. We've now got 64 partner organizations implementing more than 120 projects across Africa and the rest of the world, taking on the issue of taking on the poaching, the trafficking, and the demand for ivory. And these are just the anti-poaching projects that we've got going on right now. If you want detail, we've got reports outside that go into it's really amazing what these organizations are doing, and they're from the biggest organizations like WWF and the Wildlife Conservation Society to the small, deeply embedded ones whose names you won't have heard of. We've funded the Okapi project, very small, highly effective project, and we've funded them to do elephant work as well. So the Crisis Fund, I think, the key thing about the Crisis Fund is its ability to create collaborations. And we've seen it be very effective in anti-poaching and anti-trafficking. But I think the most important results that have come out of the conservation movement, and we can't take entire credit for it because everyone is working on this, but we've played our part, is in the realm of demand reduction. And 3 years ago, it would have seemed impossible. We would have said it was impossible for a nation as populous as China and with such a long tradition of ivory carving and trade in ivory to to turn against the trade and to close the trade down. I've just come from CITES in South Africa, at the biggest wildlife convention on wildlife trade, and China was leading the charge, calling for the world to shut down their domestic ivory markets. And China's leadership in this is going to be absolutely critical. So where we're going with this now, with the crisis fund, we're actually seeing markets on the borders of China start to mushroom up and become problems. And this is where we're working with WildAid, and we've hired the help of a very serious player. He's called Tony Jia. Take a look.
สนใจงานแกะสลักใช่ไหมเท่าไหร่เดี๋ยวผมให้ราคาพิเศษเลย
What are you doing? When you buy ivory, you are paying to kill elephants. When the buying stops, the killing can too.
You can see why our daughter loves Tony Jia. So beyond the ivory crisis, when we defeat the ivory crisis, and we're confident that we will, with everyone working together, we're confident that we will, we still face the long-term challenge of elephants in Africa. And this guy, Tim, can show us one of the ways that we do this. He's the biggest elephant that we've ever collared. He's a most beautiful animal. He lives down in Amboseli. Unfortunately, he's also a very naughty animal. He's grown into the habit of crop raiding, and that's because people have moved into the wetlands that he once used in the dry season. Unfortunately, it's now all agriculture, and for him, that's great, because he's thinking, oh, wonderful, there's nice food to be had there. Unfortunately, you can't see it in this photo, but he's got a big arrow wound in his flank, and that's happening most weeks. He's always on the verge of killing people, and people are always on the verge of killing him. It wasn't going to last long. So we put a collar on him with a group of the organizations down there who are going to be doing the monitoring. And what this is going to help us do, this enables us to track his movements. And this is a tracking app that Vulcan developed with us. And you can see here, this is the first night we had the collar on him. We didn't have any interventions going on, but you can see how he's dawdling in croplands here, having a high old time. Where the lines are thin, he's moving fast. Where they're fat, he's hanging around. And he's having a lovely time snacking that night. The next night, we deployed the rangers, and they start... I'm taking too long, apparently. They start trying to push him out of the farmlands. And they're using chili pepper to do that. And he's quite wily. He's sort of taking a snack here, waiting for the rangers to come. Then he's hopping over a dry riverbed, and he knows it's going to take him half an hour to get round in their car, but he's fine. So we've got some work still to do, but we'll get there.
But the thing is about these kinds of techniques is that you have to pair them up with other ways. And this is where we get the smallest friend of farmers, which is the honeybee, to actually help protect their crops. One of our wonderful researchers, Lucy King, discovered that elephants are actually quite frightened of bees. It's particularly the sound of angry bees that they don't like. So when they hear this sound, they know from an early age that what they have to do is pack up the family and get out of there. It also turns out that they make a unique vocalization, which sounds like this. Now, when Lucy took that sound and put it onto an oscilloscope, she was able to isolate one particular word in elephant language, and when she played it back to the elephants, they had exactly the same response as if they were listening to angry bees. That word in elephant language means beware. Get out of here, bees are here. So how do you turn this into practical conservation? Well, you build beehive fences. You basically get a whole line of fences along the edge of a crop, you link them up with wire. When the elephant tries to push through, they swing all the beehives at the same time, the bees come pouring out, and the elephants run away. If you bring these two things together, they can be very effective. Most importantly, what this is doing is allowing the farmers to harvest their crops and to get the honey, and it's radically altering people's attitudes towards elephants in a more positive way. And we've really got no time at all to talk tonight about the work that we're doing with the community, but everyone else has been saying it. You get the picture. We're doing similar things. But the key point is that elephants will not survive if they're not valued by the people with whom they share their land. Now, that value comes in many different ways. It can be the economic impact that it can have through tourism and alternative livelihoods. But it's also the role that elephants play in maintaining the integrity of an ecosystem and, of course, the cultural and symbolic significance that elephants have for different people across Africa. And so if we are able to secure a future for elephants, who are these huge animals that need so much space, and whose presence or absence shapes entire ecosystems, then we have a chance of looking after all the other animals that live under their umbrella. And what this picture really symbolizes for me is this idea that everything in our biosphere is interconnected. The trees that seed the clouds, the rain that nurtures the earth, the elephants that reseed the forests that, in turn, create the air that we breathe. This interconnectivity is the fabric of life, and we have to champion it above all else. And everybody who's been speaking here today has said the same thing. So it's been a long day. I know you all want to go home, but this really is a fantastic opportunity to join the alliance fighting for nature, one way or the other. It doesn't matter if you're supporting the Saiga or if you go and build an insect nesting site in your garden. The point is to start taking steps towards the change. And the more of us that do it, and the more we join hands together, the more we become a very powerful force. And so, thank you all. Support something today. We hope it might be Save the Elephants, and come and see us in Kenya. Thank you. I'm sorry for talking.